Hello and welcome to Talking Papers, the podcast where we talk about papers and let the papers do the talking. And today we have the paper DORi, Discovering Object Relationships for Moment Localization of a Natural Language Query in a Video. And I have with me today the first author of the paper, Cristian Rodriguez-Opazo. Christian is a research fellow at AML, the Australian Institute of Machine Learning, and until recently he was a PhD student in ANU. Hello, Christian, and welcome to the podcast.
Hey, thank you for inviting me. It's a pleasure to talk with you about our work of temporal moment localization.
Yeah, it's great to have you. For our listeners, I would just remind everyone that every episode here is kind of constructed like a paper. So we're gonna talk a little bit about like the abstract and the introduction and everything, kind of like a real paper that you would read. So without further ado, let's just dive into the paper. So tell me, Christian, in a very short 2-3 sentences, like in a TLDR kind of format, what is this paper about?
First, let me introduce myself. I did this paper when I was doing the PhD at DNU before coming here to AML. And the paper is about temporal moment localization, which means that we have a query that is describing a portion or a temporal segment of the video, and we want to um, detect or say this is the segment that is related to the query. So that is the task, and what we propose is discovering the relationship between the human and the objects to improve the activity features, and with that, being able to detect better the segment of the query.
Tell us a little bit about the like what are the main challenges of this kind of problem?
So, uh, well, videos is a little bit challenging in the sense that is a lot of data that we have to process. I guess you remember this from the IKEA data set that you did. These are long untrimmed videos from we test this on four different data sets from 30 seconds, 2 minutes, 5 minutes long in average. So uh, that is one of the challenging is really on trim videos that people is doing wherever they want. There is not constructed cameras, no position of the cameras. The camera could be moving, so it's kind of videos in the wild. So that is really nice, I guess, for retrieval aspect of the videos, but also is quite challenging to manage this data and also to get information that is useful for doing the retrieval task.
A lot of data is always challenging. And actually, what I wanted to ask you is what can this be used for? So, why is this problem important in every listener's day to day life?
We have many videos. I mean, we are doing videos at this moment, right? So we are people that consume videos every day nowadays. And if we want to find information for some specific part, usually retrieval engines or search engines use metadata to know where the what videos are related to the query. But actually, we want to create something that is looking at the video and say to us, well, the information that you're looking is in the video, right? So search engine is going to be benefit from this. And you can imagine if you have a security camera that is looking at some spot, it's usually nothing happen on this it's really common nothing happens. And if you want to look and specific information, you have to look at 24 hours, 48 hours of video to look what when this is happening, or if something happens that is a anomaly on the of the video, right? So these kind of techniques help you to don't look all the video, just the remarkable part of the video that you are looking.
I find myself, searching for videos on YouTube, how to change a tire. And then you have like 2 or 3 minutes of the person just talking about the type of his car that he has. So it would be great to be able to just find the moment that he starts changing the tire and jump to that moment.
Yeah, I also think that if we want to create robots that can retrieve information from the web to learn by themselves, it would be nice if you can create a search engine that is, you say to the robot, look, I want that you cook like a barbecue. And the robot doesn't know how to do it. And he learned by itself just searching through YouTube how to do it, right?
So I think we got the introduction covered, right? We know why this problem is important. We know all the challenges. So what is special about this paper? So what's the main contribution that you've done here?
I guess I need to mention the previous work before pointing out what is the main contribution of this. So in terms of the related work, there are two branch, I will say, that is looking at this problem. One branch is like a kind of proposal and detection, like the faster RCNA approach, like where you create different proposals and then you evaluate this proposal to say, look, this is the most relevant one from for your query. And there is another branch that is called proposal free. Or so our working is in the proposal free area, and what we found is even though that people is looking at the proposal free, nobody has incorporated the human object relationship in the pipeline, and we are looking at activities in this period that is related to humans, right? So there is a lot of clues that we haven't used for retrieve the information that we want, and this paper is trying to fill that hole, like the try to use that information. So if we want to detect a person that is doing like leaving a bag alone in a train station, we would like to detect the person, we want to detect the bag, and then the action, which is leaving uh, or yeah, dropping. And the aim of the paper is trying to find this relationship between the human, the object, and the activity to get a better representation of the activity. And with that better representation of the activity, find what is the query, where the query is in the video, right?
Let's just zoom out for a minute. Okay. So your input is basically a video, right? A sequence of frames, untrimmed, unstructured. You don't know where it came from. You don't know where the camera is. And you have a query, right? You want to ask, give me a query.
A person is throwing the bag at the light switch.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. That's an example from the paper, right?
Yes.
Okay. So the person is throwing a bag at the light switch. We have a sequence of frames. We have a video. It's untrimmed. We have this query. The person is throwing a bag at the switch, and what your method is basically giving us is when is that action starting and when that action is ending, right?
Right.
So like two time stamps in
Right.
the video. So now tell us the juicy part. How do you do it?
We create a spatial temporal graph. So the spatial graph is looking at make this relationship between the human and object, as I was saying to you before, to get a better representation of the activity that is used by the temporal graph. And the temporal graph get the distribution of the start and end position of in the video for the query input, right? The special thing that we add in this paper is the spatial graph that is looking at the implicit relationship between the human and the objects.
Okay, so let's break it down a little. So we have the spatial graph. Each the graph is consisting of the three nodes, right? The objects, the human, and the actions. And like we as humans, we know that they are somehow interconnected. But you also have the temporal domain. So you have another graph that handles that temporal domain. So diving in a little deeper, so how do you like represent each one of those parts in the spatial and temporal graph?
Right, like let's go first to the spatial graph. Like as you say, we have the object, human, and activity node, and each of the objects and each of the nodes receive the information that is related to semantically related to their information, right? So if on a frame I have many objects, I put all the objects in this object node, and I have many features that are related to the human, meaning that clothes or part of the human body, I put it in the human node. So what I'm expecting that the graph is able to implicitly learn the relationship between the human and object because I don't have any label. I don't know what is the relationship between the human and the object, right? And that is really costly to annotate, right? So I am expecting that through the graph or through the spatial graph, I can learn implicitly the relationship between the human and the object for getting a better activity representation. So that is happening for each of the keyframe that has been selected. And then we have the activity representation that is passed to a temporal graph. And this activity representation for each of the keyframe then are passed through a temporal graph to get the start and end probability, right? So going to get something like a probability distribution for each of the activity representation for each of the activity nodes, saying, yes, I am part or not of the query. I am the starting of the query or not. The output of the network is the start and the end, and is very weakly supervised because the only supervision that I have for this is the start and end of the query.
So you were talking about keyframes, so how are those selected or generated?
The activity representation is using i3D, which is taking a certain amount of frames for create a representation of these frames. So what I did is, or what we did is, like we take the sharpest frame for getting the spatial information for this subset of frames, and that is the keyframe. We are just looking at getting spatial information from the keyframe, and from the i3D, we are getting the temporal information.
Basically, you're just using supervision with the start and end times, but you don't use any type of supervision during training for all the rest of the relationship between the objects and the human. Are you using any pre-trained I3D?
Yeah, yeah. Everything is pre-trained on their own datasets for action recognition. So I get a good initialization of the activity representation, but it's not tailored for the task that I am looking for. But I have tried different type of activity representation. For example, I use BGG as well, just using the keyframe for getting the representation of the keyframe, and I compare this with other methods that I use in BGG, I am still getting better performance than them because I guess I am looking at the information as the spatial information, right? So um, something that is quite interesting, like the activity, for example, reading a book or looking at a cell phone, is quite similar in the temporal domain. If you don't have any knowledge about the spatial information, you cannot do a you cannot decide which of them is right. You cannot disambiguate this. So when you have object information, you actually can say, look, he's looking at the cell phone. He's not reading a book because it's not a book at the image, right? So um, but the problem of using the objects, and I guess that is one of the challenge of the paper or of this work, is there are a lot of information. So imagine that for each keyframe, we have 15 objects. And for the shortest video, where we have 30 seconds, we're going to have 100 or 150 i3D informations. So we have 100 i3D times 15 objects.
Oh, wow, this is getting big.
So it's quite big, and the way that we handle that is using something like a mean field, like trying to get the mean of all the objects that are related to that node, to the object node or to the human node. So this aggregation is the way that we solve the costly memory, or try to be more efficient in memory. Uh, but certainly we need to try better ways to do this aggregation, and probably more explicit way to do something like an attention on the objects.
And how do you actually, like, I imagine that in a typical video you have objects that coming in and out of the frame every time. So how do you handle those kind of cases?
I let the network to learn. I just, because I don't have any annotation, right? So I just let the network to learn if those objects are good for the prediction of the start and end. So something that I am looking now after this paper is how this is going to affect the out of the distribution at testing time, right? So the query is drinking a coffee, but every time that someone is drinking a coffee in the training time, there is a table. So it could be that in training time, the network is learning that a table is actually related to drinking coffee. So when you move to testing time, if there is no table, doesn't know how to react and doesn't know where is the start and end. And that is because I don't have any annotation. So I am digging in the idea of how to deal with the out of distribution and actually look at the object that you need to look.
So you kind of touched on this before, but let's move on to the results section of the paper. So what are the standard evaluation metrics, data sets?
So we are evaluating this on the mean intersection over union and intersection over union. We have a start and end, and we compare that with the ground truth or the gold standard start and we get this intersection over union with that. If the intersection over union is bigger to some threshold, we consider this a positive example. So we are evaluating this with the zero point 0.3, 0.5, 0.7, 0.9 intersection over union, and also with the mean intersection over union.
I actually have a question about this. So how do you actually label a start and end of an action? It's a bit of a fuzzy definition, isn't it?
It's a really subjective task of saying when to start and end. And we acknowledge that. And the previous paper that we did is actually trying to tackle that through a soft labeling process, saying that the start and end is noisy. So we are going to consider that noise as a Gaussian distribution of the start and end for all the annotators. And just adding that as a key divergency between the distribution of the network with the start and end of the annotator gave us better performance. But that is the previous paper.
Which paper is that?
The proposal-free temporal moment localization.
Okay, check that out. Okay, so back to the result section. So how did it perform? When does it fail? What were your observation? Anything surprising?
I will say that even though the metric is good, it has some issues that, for example, you can get a really high intersection or union at zero point 0.1 threshold, right? Given that we are doing this without proposals, we are just considering the recall at one, so the top one. And if the intersection or union is small, actually you can get something like a really long start and end and get good performance. So something that is for me is really impressive about this method is that the best performance of the method is a higher intersection union. So at zero point 0.7 or 0.9 is beating all previous methods. Also, it's good to know, like, we did some visualization of what are the objects that the network is looking at the time of the query. And it's good to see that actually the network is looking at the object that is specifically mentioned in the query, even though that we don't have any annotation of them.
I also saw that you ran some ablation studies to see how do the different nodes affect the method, and like it showed that the major boost was if you use the graph initially, like the use of the graph, the spatial graph was like a huge boost in performance. Then as you gave the nodes the different subtasks or the different like when you characterize the nodes, then each one introduced its own boost, and then when you put them all together, then it works really well.
I like those evaluation studies, but yeah, I think for me it's quite obvious because you are adding this object information that is disambiguating the object that you're looking, right? So it's just confirming something that I was suspecting, right? Like when you remove the object, you don't have any information of the object, so it's going to get down. So for me, the evaluation studying is not that surprising, but what is really surprising to me is that the model is getting quite good performance at high intersection over union.
So let's move on to the conclusion and future work section. How do you see like the impact of the paper so far, and what other directions do you think are interesting in the future for all of our new listeners that are looking for opportunities to continue in this line of work?
We know there is a lot of literature saying that the human actions need to consider objects for better understanding of what is happening in the video. So this paper is just adding more empirical evaluation of this hypothesis that is showing that the object is really important to know what is the action that the people is doing. As a conclusion, I guess that is my take. Like the objects are really important, and the spatial graph is taking this implicitly. I think that for the future work, I like the idea of getting more annotations for doing this like a explicit relationship between the action, the human, and the object. And there is one paper that I recommend to everyone to read, the action genome, where they're actually doing the effort to annotate all the action, objects, and human relationship and create a semantic graph of this relationship. I think that is amazing effort, but it's quite difficult to do with all the data that we have. And I guess the next direction is trying to learn this in a in explicit way, implicit way, sorry, like trying to learn how the relationship, even though that we are doing this in the graph, we are not trying to do something with the attention in the objects, right? Like what I was saying to you, like try to remove this out of the distribution problem in training time, or do something with this information, maybe a Bayesian approach or something that is considering the uncertainty in the for the detection process. So that is one thing that I would like to do in the future work. I think also it's like, even though that this task is for the temporal, what I have done is for the temporal moment localization, I like that we have shared all the features of objects and activity representation to everyone in these really challenging data sets, ActivityNet, YouCook II, Charity 8. And given that we have shared this, I am expecting that people is using these features to not just temporal moment localization, also for action recognition, where they use the objects in a better way to get the action recognition tasks working. Yeah, so I really would like that everyone use these features to make their work on video analysis work.
So where are they available for download?
You can see our paper and you can see the GitHub where everything is shared, and the code and also the features.
Okay, we're going to put that in the description as well, so it'll be easily accessible to everyone. Okay, so moving to the last part, which is not a part of a paper, but more of a part of the what happens after you submit the paper. I call it "What did reviewer two say?" Okay, so basically, feel free to share some comments that you got from the reviewers of the paper that made the paper better.
I'm happy to share that I submit this 2 times. So the first time they pointed out that the ablation study wasn't good enough, and I guess that is my fault because I thought that the information was obvious, right? As I say, for me this is obvious, but I think the evaluation is something that you have always to do. The first reviewer too that I got is saying I need more information about the graph. What happened if you remove the graph? And for me, it was like, but if I remove the graph, there's no object, right?
If you remove the graph, there's no paper.
Yeah, there's no paper. So anyway, I did those experiments and I added to the paper and I submit again. And after adding those evaluation studies, I didn't have bad comments. Everyone was saying that is really neat and good paper. They asked me some question of why you are just considering human and objects in a video if the query could be about anything, right? But actually, the paper is about human actions. So I don't know, like was quite strange, but it's good. I think the reviewers was quite happy, and me too with the comments that they did at the second round of the paper.
Yeah, that's an interesting comment, right? So the paper is obviously about human actions, but I guess the reviewer meant to ask, well, can this be extended to non-human related
Yeah.
tasks or actions or activities or things that happen in videos? And I'm assuming the general answer is yes. You just need a new node to replace the human node with.
Yeah, yeah, and I haven't tried, but the method is general enough, I will say, to put anything that is not a human in the object node, and still get information from actions that are related to a dog jumping for a ball or something, right, like that. What we found that every if we split the information of object and human nodes, we get better understanding of the video. But if there is no human involved, we still could get good performance just using object information, right? So getting back a little bit of the ablation study that didn't get really on deep, but something that we did is like, what happened if we remove the human node and put everything on the object node? And the performance is still good. So I guess like if we are not looking at the human and the video is not human at all, the object node is going to do their work and look how to get the relationship between the objects and the activity.
Yeah, knowing the computer vision community, I totally can see a paper. Kitten action recognition.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah. Okay, so I think it's time to wrap up. So thank you very much, Christian, for agreeing to be our very first guest at the Talking Papers podcast. It was quite an experience.
Yeah, nice, good fun.
Yeah. Okay. So see you next time on Talking Papers.
Sure, hopefully, yeah, I'm happy to. And if anyone has any question or anyone want to share some thoughts about this task on any task about video analysis, I am happy to talk anytime by Slack or anything. Uh, so yes, please contact me, and if you need any help with the code or something, let me know.
Thank you, Christian. So yes, I'm going to put in the description all of the links to the paper and GitHub and all the relevant information that you can dive into DORi even deeper. I'm assuming there's a Nemo paper coming up next. So thank you and goodbye.
Bye bye.
Thank you for listening. That's it for this episode of Talking Papers. Please subscribe to the podcast feed on your favorite podcast app. All links are available in this episode description and on the Talking Papers website. If you would like to be a guest on the podcast, sponsor it, or just share your thoughts with us, feel free to email talking.papers.podcast@gmail.com. Be sure to tune in every week for the latest episodes. And until then, let your papers do the talking.